Good morning, I'm Craig DeGrelli. It's Thursday, January 16th, 2025, and these are your Unbiased Updates. President Biden addresses the nation. His goodbye to America is packed with various warnings, what he said, and reaction this morning. And deal or no deal? A ceasefire to end more than a year of fighting in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas hits a snag. The new developments and why Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu is slamming on the brakes.
From the Straight Arrow News Studio, bringing the stories that matter to you from across the United States and around the world, these are today's Unbiased Updates.
Speaking from the Oval Office one last time as President of the United States, President Joe Biden delivered his farewell address last night, touching on what he believes are his accomplishments over the past 4 years. Biden also spoke about reforms he would like to see made in Washington, D.C., and issued a stark warning detailing his concerns on what he sees as a concentration of power among the ultra-wealthy, as well as the risks of technology. In what is likely his final address to the nation after a political career spanning 5 decades, Biden opened up his speech speaking about the ceasefire deal in Gaza, announced earlier in the day, saying he kept the incoming administration fully informed. He then spoke of accomplishments during his term, citing job growth following the pandemic, modernization of infrastructure, and Medicare reform, telling Americans it will take time to feel the full impact of what has been achieved. With the inauguration of Donald Trump just days away, Biden said he will ensure a peaceful transfer of power, but cautioned.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share.
Referencing President Eisenhower's concerns about a military-industrial complex 6 decades ago, Biden says he's equally concerned about the dangers of a potential rise of a tech-industrial complex.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
Biden next remarked about the rise of artificial intelligence, calling it the most consequential technology of our time, and that the United States, not China, must lead in this race. The president also spoke of his hopes for change in the nation's capital, calling for an end of hidden funding called dark money from campaign contributions, a ban on stock trading from members of Congress, and for the United States to enact an 18-year term limit on the Supreme Court justices. He also called for the U.S. Constitution to be amended.
We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be.
In closing, President Biden called on Americans to stay engaged in the process of democracy, telling the story of a veteran who worked at the Statue of Liberty, known as the Keeper of the Flame. He said America will always be defined by one word: possibilities.
My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strengths of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too.
How the president's address was received depends on whose social media account you chose to click on. The speech garnered responses on both ends of the spectrum. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace writing on X, quote, Joe Biden discussing democracy, a free press, institutions, and the abuse of power in his final farewell speech is rich. Republican Congressman Darrell Issa writing, quote, Joe Biden's going out of office the same way he went in, petty, partisan, and frankly, not telling the truth. And Republican Senator Rick Scott writing this, President Biden's farewell address should have been a formal apology for the endless lawfare, inflation-fueling policies, and reckless decisions made during his administration. Meantime, on the Democratic side, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi writing, tonight President Biden delivered his farewell address to a nation that is stronger because of his leadership. In doing so, he honored the vision of founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, and the aspirations of our children. Former President Barack Obama writing about his former vice president saying, 4 years ago, in the middle of a pandemic, we needed a leader with the character to put politics aside and do what was right. That's what Joe Biden did. I'm grateful to Joe for his leadership, his friendship, and his lifetime of service to this country we love. This morning, some major developments. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says his cabinet will not meet to approve the deal for a ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas ends, quote, a last-minute crisis. The decision comes after Netanyahu's office says Hamas went back on some of the terms of the agreement, but did not specify which terms. Even as a deal seems close or imminent, Israeli strikes have continued in the Gaza Strip, with the territory's health ministry reporting at least 48 people have been killed over the past day. Under the three-phase ceasefire agreement, fighting will stop in Gaza for 42 days. 32 Israeli hostages, including 2 Americans, and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners will be freed in the first phase, which is set to go into effect on Sunday. The remainder of the hostages, including Israeli male soldiers, are to be released in a second phase. Hamas has said it will not release the remaining captives without a lasting ceasefire and a full Israeli withdrawal. Israeli troops will pull back to the edges of Gaza, and many Palestinians will be able to return to what remains of their homes, something many people took to the streets to celebrate. Israel is also set to allow a flood of humanitarian aid into the region. The Associated Press is reporting mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the United States are to meet in Cairo today for talks on implementing the deal. On Truth Social, President-elect Donald Trump said his administration will continue to work closely with Israel to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. Back here in the U.S., to quote the National Weather Service, there's good news and bad news this morning in the fight against the wildfires raging in Southern California. The good news is the NWS red flag warning for the Los Angeles area is lifted, and strong winds that have made it much harder for fire crews to battle the flames are dying down. The bad news, however, is dangerous fire and weather conditions are expected to return next week. This as firefighters are still working to contain the 2 biggest, deadliest, and most destructive fires still raging right now, the Palisades and the Eaton fires. Also, a new fire has broken out in the San Bernardino area. The Eaton and Palisades fires have not grown much over the past few days, but they are both still largely uncontained. Fire officials report progress in the desperate fight to put out the flames. Meanwhile, the so-called Little Mountain Fire in San Bernardino spans more than 30 acres and has not yet been contained. Police arrested a man in connection with that fire on 2 felony charges, including one of reckless burning. Back to politics. Senate confirmation hearings continue today as President-elect Donald Trump's picks for Interior Secretary, EPA Administrator, Housing and Urban Development Secretary, and Treasury Secretary answer questions from lawmakers. On Wednesday, Pam Bondi, Trump's nominee for Attorney General, was on the hot seat from Democratic senators, including a question from Senator Dick Durbin, asking Bondi if she believes Trump lost the 2020 election.
To my knowledge, Donald Trump has never acknowledged the legal results of the 2020 election. Are you prepared to say today under oath without reservation that Donald Trump lost the presidential contest to Joe Biden in 2020?
Ranking Member Durbin, President Biden is the President of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the President of the United States. There was a peaceful transition of power. President Trump left office, and was overwhelmingly elected in 2024.
Senator Marco Rubio, Trump's pick for Secretary of State, also had his hearing on Wednesday. Here now is Straight Arrow News political reporter Ray Bogan with more.
Senator Marco Rubio gave insight as to how he would work to end the war in Ukraine as Secretary of State during his confirmation hearing Wednesday. Rubio said it should be the official position of the United States that the war needs to end, which he contends differs from the Biden administration.
My differences with the Biden administration throughout this process is that they never clearly delineated what the end goal of the conflict was. What exactly were we funding? What exactly were we putting money towards? And on many occasions, it sounded like however much it takes for however long it takes. That is not a realistic or prudent position.
Rubio says that's because no matter how much aid the United States and its allies provide, Ukraine is not big enough to keep fighting against Russia.
The problem that Ukraine is facing is not that they're running out of money, it's that they're running out of Ukrainians. There's a size differential here that's important. Now, what Vladimir Putin has done is unacceptable. There's no doubt about it, but this war has to end.
Rubio said the war will end with hard diplomacy and that both sides need to make concessions. He said he does not yet know what the master plan looks like.
The truth of the matter is that in this conflict, there is no way Russia takes all of Ukraine. The Ukrainians are too brave and fight too hard, and the country is too big. That's not going to happen. It's also unrealistic to believe that somehow a nation the size of Ukraine, no matter how incompetent and no matter how much damage the Russian Federation has suffered as a result of this invasion, there's no way Ukraine is also going to push these people all the way back to where they were on the eve of the invasion.
Rubio's confirmation hearing could be considered a formality due to his broad support. He's going to likely have the fastest and smoothest process of all nominees, and he could be on the job by inauguration.
Our Ray Bogan reporting from Washington, D.C. Finally this morning, a big win for billionaire Jeff Bezos and his space company, Blue Origin, as its new Glenn rocket went blasting off into orbit.
5, 4, 1. Lift off. All 7 engines at full thrust.
What a sight, and you hear all the celebrating in the background. The company's first rocket, powerful enough to launch satellites to space, took off just after 2 a.m. Eastern Time from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. All 7 of its engines fired successfully. Blue Origin is marking the mission a success after demonstration technology on board the rocket called the Blue Ring Pathfinder was safely carried to orbit. However, the company did not reach its bonus goal of guiding part of the New Glenn rocket back to a safe landing on a platform in the middle of the ocean after takeoff. It took Blue Origin rival SpaceX 4 tries to get a similar maneuver right. However, Blue Origin stressed its most important goal was for the test satellite to reach orbit. NASA intends to use the New Glenn rocket to launch 2 orbiters to Mars in the future. Wow, that's amazing. And I looked it up. I didn't know this. I probably should have. That Glenn rocket is named after the late astronaut John Glenn. Perfect, right? Those are your unbiased updates for this Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.